my son and his wife walked into my shop and demanded $500,000. The same son who threw his pregnant 16-year-old daughter out in the rain 10 years ago. The same daughter I took in when she had nowhere else to go. Now they see the business we've built together, the success we fought for, and they think they deserve a piece of it. We're family, his wife said. You owe us. I looked at them standing there in my office, entitled, confident, a spiritual leader beside them, smiling like he had already won. They had no idea what I had been preparing for years. They threatened to destroy everything. Our reputation, our customers. They said they would tell everyone I stole their daughter and manipulated her. The same daughter they called a disgrace. The same daughter they threw away like garbage. My granddaughter stood beside me, the woman she had become, strong and unafraid, and I reached into my desk drawer. What came next, they never saw coming. Because when you abandon your child, you lose the right to profit from her survival. And I was going to make sure they understood that before we continue. Please leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, and subscribe to the Still Got It True Stories channel. We're creating a community of incredible people who know that our best chapters can happen at any age. Now, back to the story. I was counting receipts at the kitchen table when the knock came. I remember the dull yellow light, the slow tick of the cheap clock, and how peaceful it all was right before I stood up. In this building, you get used to other people's noise. There was nothing friendly about the sound on my door. It was urgent and sharp, not the kind of knock you hear from someone who wants to borrow sugar. When I opened up, I found a girl on my porch. She stood in a puddle that spread from her shoes, rain dripping into the collar of a coat she had outgrown. Her hair was wet and tangled, and half her face was hidden, but there was no mistaking those eyes. Michael's eyes, my son's, soft in the corners, but now rimmed red and braced for bad news. I had not seen her in more than a decade, not since her parents decided I was a bad influence and cut me from their lives. By now, Chloe was nearly grown, already 16 years old. Though the way she stood there, she looked as lost as the day they took her from me. She met my gaze and her voice cracked on the first word. Grandma Valan. I answered by holding the door wide, not just in invitation, but in certainty. When the world lights someone on fire, you do not make them beg for water. She ducked inside, half flinching, as if expecting me to change my mind. I closed the door behind her and turned the deadbolt. She huddled against the wall, damp hair stuck to her forehead, both hands clutching a plastic shopping bag to her chest, knuckles gone white. She looked just like a child who had been outside too long, except she was carrying something heavier on her back. I found my old blue towel hanging by the radiator. It was warm and thin, perfect for a night like this. I handed it over and she pressed it to her face. There were no thank yous and no further explanations. I did not need them. Her whole body was trembling. Sit down before you fall down, I said. She took the nearest chair at the kitchen table, still gripping that bag. I didn't know where else to go, she said. The words came in a single piece. Now that she was inside, her voice was what gave out. They threw me out. Tonight, Chloe said. Mom said I had shamed the family. Dad just stared at the wall. She told me to pack and go, and make peace with a higher power outside her house, because there wasn't any left in it for me. She kept her eyes on the pattern of the tabletop, like she could disappear into it. I busied myself filling the kettle and setting out to clean mugs. There are things you do that are not about kindness so much as protocol, a way to tell the world it has not broken your routine, only rearranged its meaning. I glanced at the wall and couldn't keep my voice quite as steady as I would have liked. I take it your father didn't disagree with her, am I right? Chloe shook her head. A tear slipped down her cheek and she wiped it away with the corner of the towel. He just looked past me like I had turned invisible. My mom said, "You made your choice. Now live with your consequences." She asked for my phone and my house key, just held out her hand like she deserved it, said a long prayer to Pastor James's higher power. She called me an example for the other girls to see what happens to people who make mistakes. Her voice twisted on the last few words. She was not much older than a child, and all I could think was how familiar the cruelty sounded when my son and his wife found the Covenant community. Their new family. I was the first person they cut loose. They called me unfit, said I would infect their righteousness if I stayed in their lives. Michael delivered the message himself, with Victoria waiting in the car. That was 12 years ago. I tried to visit Chloe at her 5th birthday, and found the door locked and the curtains drawn. "Did they let you bring anything else?" I asked quietly. She dumped out the plastic bag on the table, her movements jerky, a change of underwear, one clean shirt. The good book they gave her was still at the bottom of the bag, its gold letters almost flaking off. She did not touch it. All Mom said was, "Maybe now you will understand what it means to be humbled," she said. If I prayed hard enough, maybe a higher power would take me back. Asked me if I was sorry. I said I was sorry for ever believing her. That was when she slammed the door. The kettle groaned. I filled both mugs and slid hers across the table. I handed her a plate with 2 slices of bread and a thick pat of butter. The way Chloe ate, you would think she had walked for hours. She didn't meet my eyes again until her second slice. "The boy is from the community, too," she said, touching her belly, her voice a whisper now. "Jake, when I told him I was pregnant, he said it wasn't his. He wouldn't even look at me. He told me to keep my mouth shut or I would ruin everything for him." She pushed her plate away. "I think he is more scared of Pastor James than anything else. When Mom found out who he was, she said it only proved what she already believed about temptation. She wanted me gone so she could tell everyone it was my fault and his family wouldn't have to pay the price I did." I let the ugly pictures sit for a time. It was not the time for comfort. Not when truth needed its own seat at the table. "How far did you walk?" She shrugged. "All the way from their house. I didn't know where else to go. Thought about staying at the library, but they close at 9 o'clock. I remembered your street. I wasn't even sure if you would let me in." She was shivering now, mug pressed tight in her palms. "The cold is not your fault," I said, "and neither is their foolishness." I got a blanket from the closet and draped it around her shoulders. Soft but not special. Ordinary objects for extraordinary circumstances have their own dignity. I sat across from her and folded my hands, letting her speak if she wanted. After a while, she did. "I thought, maybe you hated me for who my parents are." That landed harder than anything so far. I took a slow breath. "No, I never hated you. I hated what they became, but I always wondered about you. Every birthday, I kept hoping they would snap out of it. I never expected them to turn on their own daughter. Or maybe I did, and that is why I kept a clean pillowcase in the closet." She tried to smile. "They have rules for everything," Chloe said. "What you eat, who you talk to, what you think about men. Pastor James breaks them all and still gets to stand up in front of everyone. He says a higher power forgives, but he only forgives the ones who obey him. Victoria thinks I'm the one that corrupted her family. They always did blame the wrong people," I said. She finished her tea and sat quiet again, looking somehow more present and more spent at the same time. "You can sleep on the sofa," I told her. "In the morning, we will talk about what comes next. You are safe tonight." I gave her another blanket and made sure she had water. She lay down stiff and shivering, shoes still half on like she was afraid of being told to leave in the night. I left the lamp on in the hall. I have handled enough emergencies to know that sometimes what people need most is just to see that the darkness is not complete. I sat at my kitchen table and looked at the spot where my son used to sit when he was her age. I wondered if there was something I missed when he was growing up, some sign that faith would become cruelty when it was paired with power. I resolved not to miss any sign in Chloe that pointed to bitterness or surrender. The clock ticked and the apartment settled back into quiet. That night, I did not sleep much. Her breathing became slow and even, the first sound of hope in my old apartment in years. I watched dawn come in soft through the blinds, and I decided, no matter how everything else turned out, I was not going to let Chloe pay twice for someone else's mistakes. Some families throw people out. Some open the door. Chloe frowned. "You think they'll come back?" "I know they will." She was quiet for a moment. "I'm not afraid of them." "Good," I said, "because this is going to get worse before it gets better." The next morning, I called our lawyer, as I promised Chloe, to calm her down. Thomas Bennett had handled the business contracts when we expanded. He was thorough, practical, and did not ask unnecessary questions. I told him about Michael and Victoria's visit, about the money, about the threats. "Do they have any legal claim?" I asked. "Not unless they can prove coercion or fraud," Thomas said. "And from what you're telling me, they can't. Chloe was an adult when she started working with you. She made her own choices. But the publicity angle is trickier. They could damage your reputation, even if they don't have a legal case." "I understand," I said, "but I already knew that could happen, and I was actually prepared." I thanked him and hung up. That afternoon, Michael and Victoria came back. This time, they were not alone. The man with them was tall, late 50s, with silver hair and a smile that did not reach his eyes. He wore a dark suit and carried himself like someone used to being listened to. "This is Pastor Silas James," Victoria said. "He's the leader of our community. He wanted to speak with you." I looked at the spiritual leader. He extended a hand. I did not take it. "Mrs. Crawford," he said smoothly, "I've heard so much about you." "I'm sure you have." He smiled. "I understand there's been some tension between you and Michael and Victoria. I wanted to see if I could help mediate." "There's nothing to mediate," I said. "They asked for money. I told them I'd think about it." "Family is complicated," Pastor James said, "but the good book is clear. Children are to honor their parents." I looked at Chloe. She was standing beside me, arms crossed, glaring at the pastor. "Chloe honored her parents," I said, "right up until they threw her out for being pregnant." Pastor James's smile did not waver. "Sometimes love requires hard choices." Michael and Victoria were trying to guide their daughter toward a better path. They guided her to my door. I said, The pastor chuckled as if I had said something amusing. "You've done well for yourself, Mrs. Crawford. A successful business, a loving family. Surely you can spare something to help those in need." "The community is in need," I asked. "The community serves many people," he said. "And yes, we've hit some financial difficulties. Donations have been down. We're struggling to keep the doors open. Michael and Victoria have given everything. They're living in a difficult situation because of their devotion." I glanced at Michael. He would not meet my eyes. "So, this isn't about family," I said. "It's about money for the community." Pastor James spread his hands. "It's about helping those in need, which I believe is also a principle of faith." Victoria stepped forward. "We've brought a written request," she said. She pulled the folded paper from her purse and set it on the counter. "It outlines what we're asking for, $500,000, and a public acknowledgement that Chloe's success is partly due to the values we instilled in her." I picked up the paper. It was typed, formal, and absurd. "I'll consider it," I said. Pastor James's smile widened. "I hope you will. It would be a shame if this situation became public. Businesses can be fragile things. One bad story, and customers start to wonder. Suppliers start to ask questions. It's hard to recover from that kind of damage." The threat was clear. I folded the paper and set it on the counter. "I'll let you know," I said. They left. The door chimed again. Chloe let out a breath she had been holding. "He's a manipulator," she said. "Yes," I agreed. "What are we going to do?" I looked at the paper on the counter, at the door where they had just exited, at the shop we had built together, and said, "Leave that to me. You have already suffered too much because of them." I told them to come back on Friday. 2 days to consider their offer, I said. 2 days to get my affairs in order. They agreed, probably thinking I needed time to figure out how to liquidate assets or beg the bank for a loan. They had no idea what I was really doing. I spent those 2 days making phone calls to Thomas Bennett, our lawyer, to Rachel Monroe, the private investigator, to Claire Hoffman, the journalist who had been quietly building her own case against the community for the past 18 months, and to Special Agent David Park at the Financial Crimes Division, a man I had been corresponding with for over a year. When Friday came, I was ready. They arrived at noon, just as I had asked, Michael, Victoria, and Pastor James. I met them at the door of the shop and led them to the back office. Chloe was already there, sitting in the corner with her arms crossed. I had asked her to be present. She deserved to see this. But Pastor James settled into the chair across from my desk like he owned it. Michael sat beside him, hands folded in his lap. Victoria stood, her posture rigid, her eyes scanning the room like she was looking for something to criticize. "Have you made a decision?" Victoria asked. I did not answer right away. I opened the desk drawer and pulled out a thick manila folder. It landed on the desk with a satisfying thump. Pastor James glanced at it, then at me. "What's that?" he asked. "This," I said, "is everything I know about you." I opened the folder slowly. The first page was a photograph. Pastor James, standing beside a silver Mercedes, keys in hand, grinning at the camera. The car was new, expensive, the kind of vehicle that cost more than most people made in a year. I slid the photo across the desk. "Nice car," I said. "I didn't realize community donations were so generous." Pastor James's smile faltered. "That was a gift." "From who?" I asked. I pulled out another photo. This one showed a lakefront vacation home, large and modern with a wraparound deck and floor-to-ceiling windows. And this, another gift. Victoria stepped forward. "What are you doing?" I ignored her. I pulled out a stack of bank statements, each one marked with yellow highlights. These are financial records from the community's accounts, donations from members, most of whom are living below the poverty line. And here, I tapped one of the highlighted lines, is a transfer of $50,000 to an account in Pastor James's name, marked as consulting fees. I looked up at him. His face had gone pale. There are more, I said. Dozens of transfers over the past 5 years, hundreds of thousands of dollars, all funneled from the community into personal accounts. Yours, mostly, but also, I glanced at Michael. Some went to your son and daughter-in-law. Michael's head snapped up. That's not true. I slid another document across the desk, a bank statement with his name on it, $20,000 deposited 3 years ago, labeled as a service stipend. Funny, I didn't realize you were a community leader. Michael stared at the paper like it might bite him. Victoria's voice was sharp. Where did you get those? I hired someone, I said, a private investigator. Years ago, actually, right around the time Chloe came to live with me. I wanted to know what kind of people had thrown out their own daughter, what kind of organization convinced them it was the right thing to do. I leaned back in my chair. The more I learned, the more concerned I became, not just for Chloe, but for everyone in that group. So, I kept digging, and when the business started to grow, when we expanded and became more visible, I knew it was only a matter of time before you noticed, before you decided we owed you something. Pastor James leaned forward. This is slander. No, I said calmly. It's evidence. I pulled out another stack of papers. These are testimonies from former members of the community, people who were pressured into giving money they didn't have, families who were torn apart because they couldn't meet the group's financial demands, a woman who lost her home because Pastor James convinced her that giving 50% of her income was the only way to secure her peace. I looked at him. Her name is Margaret Lewis. She's 63 years old and living in a shelter now. But you already knew that, didn't you? Pastor James said nothing. Victoria's voice was cold. You can't prove any of this. Actually, I said, I can, because I've already given copies of everything in this folder to the authorities. Special Agent David Park has been investigating financial fraud and tax evasion within certain organizations. Your community is now officially under federal investigation. The room went silent. Michael looked like he might be sick. Victoria's hands were shaking. I also gave a copy to Claire Hoffman, I continued. She's an investigative journalist. She's been working on a story about your group for over a year. My files gave her everything she needed to go to print. The article will be published next week. Pastor James stood abruptly. You have no right. I have every right, I said. You came into my shop and threatened me, threatened my family, demanded money you didn't earn and had no claim to. You thought you could pressure us the same way you've pressured everyone else, but you were wrong. I stood as well, meeting his gaze. You were already finished before you walked through that door. Asterisk. Victoria turned to Michael. Say something. But Michael just sat there, staring at the floor. Pastor James's voice was sharp. This is harassment. We'll sue. Go ahead, I said. My lawyer is expecting it. And when you do, all of this, I gestured to the folder, becomes public record. Every transaction, every testimony, every lie you've told. Is that really what you want? He did not answer. Asterisk. There was a knock on the door. I opened it. 2 men in dark suits stood in the hallway, badges clipped to their belts. Mrs. Crawford, one of them said. I'm Special Agent Park. We spoke on the phone. I stepped aside. Come in. The agents entered. One of them looked at Pastor James. Silas James. The pastor's jaw tightened. Yes. We'd like to ask you some questions about financial irregularities at your community and about an attempted extortion that was reported to us earlier this week. Victoria's voice rose. Extortion? We didn't extort anyone. Agent Park pulled out a small recording device. Mrs. Crawford recorded your last visit, the one where you demanded $500,000 and threatened to destroy her business if she didn't comply. That's extortion under federal law. I had not mentioned the recording. I wanted to see their faces when they realized how thoroughly I had outmaneuvered them. Michael finally looked up. His voice was quiet. Mom. I looked at him. My son, the boy I had raised, the man I barely recognized. You threw out your daughter, I said. You let that man, I nodded toward Pastor James, convince you that cruelty was righteousness. And when you saw that she had survived without you, that she had thrived, you decided you deserved a piece of it. Not because you loved her, because you needed money. Michael's eyes were wet. We were desperate. You were selfish, I said. There's a difference. Agent Park gestured toward the door. We need you to come with us. All three of you. Pastor James tried to argue, but the other agent cut him off. You can cooperate now, or we can make this more difficult. Your choice. They left quietly. Michael looked back once, but I did not meet his eyes. Victoria walked out with her head high, still clinging to whatever dignity she thought she had left. Pastor James muttered something about lawyers. When the door closed, the office was silent. Chloe stood and walked over to me. She did not say anything. She just put her hand on my shoulder. I looked at the folder on the desk, at the years of preparation that had led to this moment. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel relieved. I just felt tired. Is it over? Chloe asked. Not yet, I said. But it will be, she nodded. We stood there for a moment, the two of us, in the small office we had built together. Outside, the shop was still running, customers were still shopping, life was still going on, and we were still standing. The news broke on a Tuesday. I was restocking the produce section when Chloe called me over to the register. She had pulled up an article on her phone, the headline bold across the screen, "Community Leader Arrested in Multimillion-Dollar Fraud Scheme." I read it standing there, my hands still smelling like apples. Silas James had been charged with wire fraud, tax evasion, and money laundering. The article mentioned the community by name, detailing years of financial exploitation, testimonies from former members, and ongoing investigations. Michael and Victoria were mentioned too, facing smaller charges related to the extortion attempt. Their names were buried in the third paragraph, but they were there. How do you feel? I asked Chloe. She set the phone down. I don't know yet. That was honest. I appreciated that over the next few weeks, more articles came out. Claire Hoffman published her investigative piece in a national magazine. It was thorough, well-researched, and damning. My name appeared once in a sentence about how victims' families had helped bring evidence to light. Chloe's name was not mentioned at all. We had asked Claire to keep her out of it, and she had honored that. The community began to collapse. Members left in droves. A few reached out to me, thanking me for what I had done. I did not know what to say to them, so I kept my responses brief. You're welcome. I'm glad you're safe now. Take care of yourself. Thomas Bennett called with updates. Silas James was facing 20 years in federal prison. Michael and Victoria had accepted a plea deal, 2 years of probation, community service, and a permanent restraining order, preventing them from contacting me, Chloe, or Sophie. They would not be going to prison, but they would be marked. Their names were now tied to a scandal that would follow them. I did not feel victorious. I felt something closer to relief. One evening, after we closed the shop, Chloe and I sat in the back office, with cups of tea. Sophie was at a friend's house, so it was just the two of us. Chloe stared at the wall, her mug untouched. Do you think they'll ever apologize? She asked. No, I said. She nodded. I didn't think so either. Does that bother you? She thought about it. Not as much as it used to. I spent a long time waiting for them to see what they did wrong, but I don't think they can. Or maybe they just don't want to. Probably both, I said. She picked up her mug and took a sip. I'm glad you were ready for them. I'm glad you were, too. She smiled a little. I wasn't, not at first, but I trusted you. That meant more to me than any article or legal victory. A few weeks later, Claire Hoffman called. She was writing a follow-up piece focusing on the families who had escaped and rebuilt their lives. She wanted to include us, but only if we were comfortable. I told her I would think about it. Chloe said yes immediately. People need to know it's possible, she said, to get out, to be okay. So, we did the interview. It was shorter this time, less about the business and more about resilience. Claire asked good questions. She did not sensationalize. When the article came out, it was respectful and honest. There was a photo of the three of us standing in front of the shop, smiling. Sophie held a sign she had made herself. Family is who shows up. I liked that business picked up after the articles. Not because people felt sorry for us, but because they respected what we had built. We signed contracts with 2 new distributors and started planning a 4th location. Chloe handled most of the negotiations. She was good at it, better than I had ever been. I watched her work and felt proud in the quiet way you feel when you see someone you love become who they were always meant to be. One afternoon in late autumn, I was in the back office going over inventory when I heard Sophie's voice from the front. She had come straight from school, backpack still on, asking Chloe where to put the new shipment of canned beans. I walked out and found them together. Chloe was pointing to the shelf, and Sophie was nodding seriously. as if she were being given instructions for surgery. It was the same way Chloe had looked 10 years ago when I taught her how to stock shelves. The same focus, the same determination. Need help? I asked. Sophie shook her head. I got it, Grandma. I smiled and went back to the office, but I stayed in the doorway watching. Chloe showed Sophie how to check the dates, how to rotate the stock so the older cans were in front. Sophie listened carefully, asked one question, then set to work. Chloe stood beside her for a moment, then moved on to help a customer. Sophie kept working, steady and sure. I thought about the night Chloe had shown up on my doorstep, 16, pregnant, terrified. I thought about the years since then, the mistakes and the victories, the fear and the hope. We had built something together, not just a business, but a life, a family. It was not perfect. There were still hard days. There were still moments when Chloe thought about her parents, when Sophie asked questions we did not know how to answer. But we had each other, and that was more than enough. That evening, after we closed, the three of us walked home together. Sophie was telling a story about something that had happened at school, gesturing wildly, making Chloe laugh. I walked a step behind them, listening. The air was cool, the sky fading to purple. Streetlights flickered on one by one. We passed the park, the library, the coffee shop where we sometimes stopped on Saturdays. Everything was familiar, safe. When we got home, Chloe made dinner, and Sophie set the table. I washed the dishes while they talked about plans for the weekend. It was ordinary, unremarkable, and it was everything. Later, after Sophie went to bed, Chloe and I sat on the couch with mugs of tea. The apartment was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional car passing outside. Do you ever regret it? Chloe asked. Regret what? Taking me in, dealing with all of this. I looked at her. No, not even a little. She leaned her head on my shoulder. Thank you. I did not say anything. There was nothing that needed to be said. We sat there for a while. The two of us, in the small apartment we had turned into a home. Outside, the world kept turning. Inside, we were safe. I thought about Michael, about the boy he had been, and the man he had become. I thought about the choices he had made, the family he had lost. I felt sorry for him, in the way you feel sorry for someone who threw away something precious because they did not know its value. But I did not regret my choices. I had opened the door when someone knocked. I had protected the people I loved. I had built a life worth defending, and I would do it all again. Sophie called from her room, asking for a glass of water. Chloe got up to get it, and I followed her into the kitchen. We moved around each other easily, the way people do when they have lived together long enough to know each other's rhythms. This was the legacy, not the business, not the articles, not the justice we had fought for. The three of us together, safe. I looked at Chloe as she filled the glass, and I thought about the future, about Sophie growing up in a home where she was loved without conditions, about Chloe continuing to build something good, about the life we had made from nothing. It was not a fairy tale. It was better. It was real. So, that's my story. I'd love to hear what you think. Did my son and his wife get what they deserved? Let me know in the comments and subscribe for more stories like mine.